The heat of the day has already slipped away, leaving the city of Babylon wrapped in a softer, more forgiving warmth, the kind that feels less like a weight and more like a memory. The blazing brightness that had pressed against walls and courtyards, bleaching brick and dust into the same pale tone, has thinned into layers of gentle shadow. Somewhere behind you, in streets you have already left, the last of the market voices have faded, shutters have been drawn closed with familiar, hollow clacks, and rough wooden doors have been pushed into place and set with bars. Rooftop families have finished their final conversations and turned toward their sleeping mats beneath the still open sky. Even the restless dust of the day has settled. What had been stirred into a constant low haze by passing carts, by the steps of donkeys and men and children, now lies quiet in corners and against walls. The few people who still move through the streets do so slowly, unhurried, as if the whole city has agreed that nothing urgent belongs to this hour. Around you, in this quieter quarter near the palace complex, lamps flicker at doorways and in recessed niches, their light no longer a battle against the sun but a soft marking of space. The smell of cooking has dwindled to a faint, comforting echo, a trace of baked bread, grilled fish, boiled grain, a hint of herbs, and even that is fading as embers cool in hearths. Your own footsteps sound clearly against the worn stone. The soles of your sandals meet the pavement with a muted, regular rhythm, a gentle slap, then silence, then another. You feel the faint give of leather molding itself again around the shape of your feet, warm where it has pressed against skin all day, now beginning to cool. The air moves slowly across your face, not quite a breeze, just enough to carry with it the mingled smells of the city, baked clay, old smoke, distant water. Above the dark line of roofs, the sky has deepened into a rich, layered blue, shading toward black where it rises higher. The stars have come out in hosts, some bright and insistent, others pale and shy. The moon leans low in the east, just high enough now that its light is beginning to silver the edges of the city, walls, towers, the tops of date palms, the higher corner of a temple's ziggurat. In the distance, the line of the outer wall stands like a patient horizon, its crenellation softened by night. Ahead of you, between two tall brick facades that still hold a faint warmth from the day, an archway opens. It is a guarded passage leading upward, one of the quiet entrances tucked near the heart of royal buildings. Beyond its shadowed curve, you can already sense a change in the air, the promise of something cooler and greener. Just above the hush of the street, faint but unmistakable, you hear it, the slow, patient murmur of water that does not fall downward but climbs, lifted by unseen hands and mechanisms toward a garden in the sky. You let your stride slow as you approach, not because anyone insists upon decorum here, but because the night itself seems to ask you to move gently, as if you are stepping not only into a passageway but into another layer of the world. Crossing beneath the archway, you feel the city slip a little further away. The air changes first. The dry, powdery taste of dust and warm brick gives way to something cooler, dampened by the presence of stored water and shaded stone. The faint tang of bitumen rises from hidden mortar lines where builders have sealed bricks against seepage, a smell dark and earthy, like resin and river mud combined. On one side, beneath a wall torch that burns with a low, steady flame, a guard leans on his spear. His shoulders rest against the stone as if he has known this post for many nights. The light from the torch smears a slow orange glow across the bricks, picking out the stamped impressions left long ago, rows of cuneiform marks that name a king, a god, a project completed. Time and touch have softened the edges of the script, but the indentations remain, shallow grooves that catch shadow and light. The guard glances at you once, eyes moving over you with the lazy attentiveness of someone who has already decided that this night will be quiet. He sees nothing troubling in your unhurried pace, the calm set of your shoulders, and lets his gaze drift away again toward the darker stretch of passage. His spear but rests in a small hollow worn into the stone floor, a smooth depression carved by years of repetition. You pass close enough that the warmth of the torch brushes the side of your face. When you lift your hand in a small, respectful acknowledgement, your fingertips brush the nearest bricks. They are warm where the fire's heat has kissed them, cooler where shadow lies. Under your skin you can feel the ghost of their texture, the tiny ridges where clay was pressed and cut, the faint chips where time has broken off corners. It is as if some echo of the hands that shaped them still lingers, baked into the fabric of the wall. The passage bends, turning you away from the street and into a shallow corridor between heavy walls. The sound of the city behind you dims with each step, the scattered voices and dog barks and occasional clatter of a delayed cart fading into a muffled murmur, then into something more like memory than sound. The corridor is lit here and there by small lamps, their light pooling in concentrated circles on the floor, leaving stretches of shadow between. Ahead, the floor tilts upward. A staircase opens in front of you, wide and shallow, climbing between the walls like a river of stone. The first step under your foot is still faintly warm, storing the last of the day's heat. By the second, the warmth is mixed with cooler air seeping down from above. By the third, the night has claimed the stone entirely. Your legs fall into a slow rhythm, each step deliberate, each lift and placement of your foot a small, self-contained act. Somewhere above and out of sight, a wooden beam groans briefly, then settles. A heartbeat later, you hear a soft splash, then another, the measured, repeating sound of water being raised and poured into waiting channels. The noise is muffled by the walls, but its cadence reaches you clearly enough to feel like a promise. If you keep climbing, you will find the source. You ascend without haste, letting the world narrow to the steady pattern of breath and movement. With every stair you leave a little more of the day behind, the sharp edges of voices, the bright glare of sun, the clamor of nets and markets and workshops. What remains is simpler, the feel of stone underfoot, the coolness slowly gathering in the air, the murmur of water overhead. By the time you reach the top of this first flight, your body has already begun to settle into the slower rhythm of the night, as if with each step some invisible burden has slipped free and stayed behind on the stairs. Stepping out onto the first terrace is like stepping into a new country suspended above the old. The city's dust does not reach this high, or if it does, it is tamed here, held down by leaf and moisture. Under your feet, the paving stones are broad and smooth, their edges carefully laid so that their joins are narrow and neat. In the spaces between stone and stone, a thin line of darkness shows where water has seeped and dried again, leaving behind a faint mineral trace. At either side of the path, low walls rise to cradle thick beds of soil, their rectangular forms solid, their interiors anything but. Earth mounded within them breathes out a richer smell, damp and loamy, with hints of decaying leaves and root. Vines spill over the edges in loose cascades, their glossy leaves catching the moonlight in small, irregular flashes like scales on a slow-moving animal. You recognize some of the shapes. Broad fig leaves, with their distinctive wide lobes, cast generous shadows. The more slender, feathered fronds of date palms rise from deeper beds, their trunks hidden, their crowns fanning out high above to form a loose canopy that filters the light. The fine, lacy greens of ferns cluster in the shade of larger plants, their fronds still beaded with tiny droplets of water that glint when you pass. Interspersed with these familiar trees are others that have traveled far, pines from distant mountains, their needles darker and denser than the surrounding foliage. Shrubs whose leaves are small and thick, adapted to hold onto water even in less generous places, now enjoying the constant dampness of this artificial hill. Reeds, rescued from the river's edge, stand tall in their own corner, whispering in the faint breeze as if surprised to find themselves so high above their birthplace. Running alongside your path, only a hand's breadth away, a narrow channel has been cut and lined with brick. Tonight, the water in it is calm enough that its surface reflects like polished obsidian, a dark ribbon laid beside the lighter stone. Where it meets roughness, a tiny protrusion in the brickwork, a stray stem leaning too far, it breaks into small ripples, and the reflected stars tremble and reform. Clay lamps sit at regular intervals on the low wall between path and channel, each a humble little bowl with a pinched lip, each holding its own small flame. The oil within them, pressed from sesame seeds, burns with a steady, yellow-orange light and releases a warm, nutty scent that threads through the cooler, greener smells of the garden. Their light does not try to banish the darkness, it simply holds small circles of warmth here and there, leaving vast patches to the moon and the shadows. You pause there, just within the terrace, allowing yourself to stand still long enough for your senses to catch up. The air feels heavier here, in a pleasant way, as if it carries more substance. You draw it in and taste faint traces of leaf and water and oil, all layered over the mineral neutrality of stone. Somewhere close by, behind a screen of leaves, water trickles steadily from a higher channel into a shallow basin, the sound thin and clear, like a slender thread of silver uncoiling in the night. Your own heartbeat, which had quickened slightly during the climb, begins to fall into step with the rhythms around you. The garden, with all its quiet motion, seems to breathe, slowly, deeply, and your chest finds its place within that larger, calmer pattern. You begin to walk again, following the line of the channel as it snakes between the planting beds. On your left, a dense border of shrubs reaches to your waist, their leaves overlapping in a layered tapestry of greens. Some are smooth and broad, others small and matte, others tiny and glossy, each catching light differently. When you extend your hand and let it drift across their tops, you feel the varied textures, coolness where water has recently passed, faint stickiness where sap has dried, the tickle of finer leaves against your skin. Tiny beads of moisture cling briefly to your fingers before falling away. On your right, a row of younger date palms stands at regular intervals, each trunk armored with the pattern of old frond bases, each crown spreading feathers into the sky. The shadows they cast are tall and directionless, stretching across beds and path alike in overlapping patterns. Somewhere high among those fronds, unseen in the darkness, a small bird stirs. You hear the faint, soft shuffle of its claws on fibrous bark, the delicate ruffle of feathers as it resettles, then stillness again. The garden is not silent in the way a closed room is silent. Its quiet is alive, layered with sounds that are small yet continuous, like many strands woven into a single cloth. Water dominates this weave. It moves with different voices in different places, here, a thin, quick trickle bouncing over stepping stones in the channel, there, a rounder, fuller tone where a deeper flow glides around a bend. Somewhere beyond your immediate sight, a larger pool receives a fall of water with a soft, repetitive splash, like hands clapping gently in a distant room. Hidden among leaves and in the damp crevices of brick, insects carry on their secret conversations. Some chirp in short, regular bursts, like tiny, careful taps of a hammer. Others produce a more continuous, tremulous sound, a long, quiet note that rises and falls on some cycle of their own. Together they form a shifting, delicate chorus that never fully stops, only changes its balance as the night deepens. Beneath these nearer sounds lies a more distant one, the softened hum of the city you left. A shout, far away, reaches you as a faint exclamation and then dissolves. A dog's bark echoes between walls and then thins to nothing. A drum in a temple quarter beats at measured intervals, each low note rolling like slow thunder over the flat rooftops and down toward the river. You hear it but do not cling to it. It becomes another part of the distant tapestry, a reminder that life continues below even as you drift further into this suspended world of water and leaves. You walk very slowly, almost as if you are a guest in someone else's dream, mindful not to disturb it. Every so often your hand rests again on the low wall bordering the channel, your fingertips meeting the smooth coolness of stone polished by water and skin. Where the mortar dips slightly, a thin bead of moisture has formed, and when you touch it, it breaks under your finger, leaving a tiny cold track on your skin. With each step your body seems to recognize more deeply that there is nothing it needs to hurry toward, nothing it needs to flee from. The muscles in your calves lengthen, your shoulders drop another fraction, your breathing stays low and steady. The garden accepts your presence as easily as it accepts the slow passage of water and wind. Ahead, the path opens into a small paved court, a kind of pause in the garden's forward motion. At its center lies a long, rectangular pool sunk into the stone, its edges carefully aligned with the lines of the paving. The slabs that border it are slightly different from those of the path, perhaps more finely dressed, their upper surfaces smoother and more even. When you crouch and place your fingers on one of them, the stone feels cool and faintly damp, as if it has been drinking light and heat all day and now, in the darkness, is content to release them slowly back into the air. The water in the pool lies almost perfectly still. At the shallowest disturbance, a breath of air, a leaf falling somewhere, you can see movement, but in this moment the surface is calm enough that it behaves like polished glass. The moon sits inside it, a pale, elongated oval slightly distorted by perspective, surrounded by bright pinpricks of reflected stars. For a moment, your eyes cannot quite decide which set of lights is more real, the ones above or the ones below. At one end of the pool, a narrow stream of water enters from a spout cut into the flanking wall. The flow is modest, just enough to send a continuous, thin line into the surface where it spreads and becomes part of the whole. At the opposite end, an almost invisible notch allows the water to leave, slipping over and down into channels beneath. The slow in and out keeps the pool fresh, always itself and always changing. Along one side of the pool, a trellis rises from the stone to shoulder height, its grid supporting a vine that has taken full advantage of this arrangement. Leaves cluster thickly, overlapping in dense layers, their undersides pale and velvety, their upper surfaces darker and more reflective. From among them, small, pale flowers open toward the night. Their petals are almost luminous in the thin light, curved and soft, arranged around golden centers that hold a scent as rich as any incense. Jasmine. The perfume is unmistakable, sweet without being cloying, strong yet somehow delicate. It gathers in the air above the water, its intensity ebbing and flowing with the movement of the air. When the breeze is still, the fragrance deepens, wrapping more closely around the pool. When the air stirs, the scent thins and spreads, drifting toward the path, the channel, the surrounding beds, until it seems to be everywhere and nowhere in particular. You lower yourself to sit on the edge of the pool, letting your feet rest flat on the cool paving, your knees bent, your body balanced comfortably. The stone at your thighs supports you firmly, its solidity a quiet counterpart to the fluidity in front of you. The position feels natural, as if this ledge has been waiting for exactly this kind of resting. You lean forward and extend one hand toward the water. The surface is so clear that for a moment you see your fingers hovering above their own counterparts, pale beneath the surface. When your skin finally touches, the water yields instantly, welcoming the intrusion without resistance. It is cooler than the air, but not harshly cold, just enough of a difference to be refreshing. You let your fingertips skim along, tracing a path that sends gentle ripples outward, distorting the reflected moon into a soft, wavering shape that slowly reforms after you lift your hand. Droplets cling to your skin when you withdraw it, small beads that catch the lamplight along the pool's edge. They glitter briefly, then roll down and fall back into the water with tiny sounds that are almost too quiet to hear unless you are listening closely. Your hand, for a few moments, feels newly sensitive, as if the coolness has sharpened its awareness of air and touch. Time around the pool stretches easily. You could stay here, watching how the stars in the water slip and change with each minor movement, until the night is half gone and the moon has wandered far across the sky. You could count the flowers on the vine and lose your place again and again because your attention keeps drifting. You could simply sit, breathing in jasmine and damp stone, and do nothing else at all. Yet above you, slightly beyond the reach of the pool's lamps, the shadowed line of a higher terrace hints at more. Your eyes, drawn upward now and then, catch the outline of balustrade and foliage against the sky. The slow, steady whisper of water from above continues to call in its quiet way. When you finally rise from the pool's edge, there is no feeling of cutting something short, only the sense of turning a page in the same long, gentle story. The stair that leads to the next terrace is narrower than the first, tucked between two high beds where fig trees grow thick and generous. You find it at the far end of the court, half shaded by an overhanging branch that has been allowed to lean in rather than being strictly trimmed back. The first steps rise between stone walls that are no higher than your waist, topped with soil and roots and the rough, interlaced bases of shrubs. Above, branches spread and meet, forming a canopy that swallows much of the moonlight and paints the passage in deep, leafy shadow. You take the first step, and the world dims. The air here is cooler and more still, the breeze slowed by the mass of leaves on all sides. The smell shifts accordingly, less of lamp oil and jasmine, more of earth and sap and the faintly milky scent of fig bark. Somewhere close overhead, water drips from leaf to leaf, its path invisible to your eyes but clear to your ears. You hear each drop's journey in miniature, a sequence of tiny impacts, sharper on a dry leaf, softer on one already wet, ending in a thud so gentle against the soil that it is more imagined than heard. The stone of the steps has been worn smooth by countless feet. Under your sandals, you feel the slightest cupping where the middle of each tread has dipped over time. Here and there, roots have pushed against the underside of the stairs, producing small bulges and hairline cracks. The builders have patched these places with care, but they have not forced the garden and the architecture to ignore each other. They coexist, each adjusting a little. Halfway up, a wooden trellis spans the passage, its beams forming a low roof just above your head. When you lift your hand and touch one of the beams, the wood feels dry and ridged, its grain running beneath your fingers in subtle, parallel lines. It has darkened with age, the nearly golden color it once had now a deep, smoky brown. A cluster of grapes hangs from a vine that has wound around the trellis, the small globes gathered in a heavy triangle. In the dim light, the grapes appear more like shadow than fruit, but when you support the cluster lightly with your hand you can feel their cool weight, the way each individual berry yields slightly under pressure. They are plump, smooth, a little sticky where juice has dried on the skin of one that cracked earlier. The scent that rises when you disturb them is faint, just a hint of wine and sweetness. You imagine the taste for a moment, but the thought of disrupting this night's stillness by harvesting anything feels out of place. You let the cluster fall gently back into place and continue upward. At the top of the stair, the passage does not immediately open into another open garden. Instead, you step into a vaulted space beneath the next terrace, a hidden underbelly of arches and columns and stored coolness. The ceiling rises in brick curves, vaults springing from thick piers that stand like tree trunks in an underground grove. The undersides of the arches are darkened in places, where moisture has gathered over years and left a bloom of staining. Light comes from small lamps placed in niches at intervals along the walls, their flames reflected faintly on damp patches and on the glossy surfaces of bricks that have absorbed more water than their neighbors. The air in here is noticeably cooler, carrying the closed smell of spaces that do not see much open wind, a mix of wet stone, the faint must of old water, and the clean edge of oil smoke. The sounds shift, too. Outside, water seems to speak upward and outward. Here, the same element mutters and echoes in contained spaces, its drips and trickles bouncing off curved surfaces and returning transformed. You walk more slowly among the pillars, your footsteps making soft, hollow sounds on the floor. In some spots, your soles meet stone, in others, you pass over gratings that hide channels below, and the sound changes to something more resonant, as if you are walking above the top of a drum. From rectangular openings in the ceiling, you catch sight of the undersides of basins and channels that you have not yet reached above. Water seeps from some of them in thin threads, falling into waiting cisterns with delicate, continuous taps. In one corner, a larger rill drops into a deeper reservoir, producing a deeper note that reverberates slightly before being absorbed by the mass around it. On one side of the corridor, a broader opening reveals the base of a great water screw. It rises from a square well, its wooden spiral thick and dark with constant dampness. Even now, when the mechanism is resting or only barely turning, you can see beads of water clinging to the edges of the blades, forming, growing heavy, then falling back into the pool below. The wood creaks now and then as it takes a little of the weight and then releases it. You step nearer and feel the temperature dip another degree. The surface of the well is a darker shadow within shadows, but you can hear the gentle lap of water against its walls. The smell here is stronger: river, wood, the faint sourness of things that have been soaked for a long time. It is not unpleasant, just dense, a reminder of the long journey this water has made from the earth beneath to this higher, enclosed space. You reach out and place your fingertips lightly on the nearest column as you pass. The brick is cool and slightly rough, the mortar between units recessed just enough that you can sense the pattern. In some places, the edges of bricks have been smeared by years of contact into smooth ridges. Your fingers glide over them, feeling the accumulated touch of countless unknown hands that once walked slowly through this same understructure, perhaps on nights very much like this one. The corridor bends, the arches lowering a little, and the quality of the air begins to change once more. A few steps later, you emerge from the vaulted coolness into open air again, and the second terrace of the gardens reveals itself under the night sky. Here, the plantings are taller, more established, as if this level holds the older core of the garden's life. Olive trees stand with trunks that twist and bend, thick and muscular, their bark furrowed with deep grooves. Their narrow leaves, dark on one side and paler on the other, catch the light in rippling patches when the wind moves through them, making the trees seem to shimmer. Between them, citrus trees hold their own spaces. Round fruits hang from their branches, their surfaces dulled by the lack of daylight but still catching enough moonlight to suggest their pale yellow or green. When the breeze carries it just so, the sharp, bright scent of their rinds reaches you, a clean, almost sparkling aroma that cuts lightly through the heavier earth smells. Beyond these, broad fig leaves overlap and fill in gaps, their shadows deep and generous. Date palms thrust their tall, straight trunks upward, their crowns forming feathered patterns against the sky. The overall effect is of walking into a room whose ceiling is made of overlapping leaves and branches, with stars showing through in irregular cracks. The path under your feet is similar to the one below but feels slightly different. Somewhere beneath the surface, channels and cavities change the way sound travels. Your steps have a marginally different echo, the stone perhaps a little thinner where it bridges some hidden space. You do not need to know the exact structure to sense that you are walking not only among plants but above a careful lattice of engineering. Near the center of this level, partially sheltered by a pair of intertwining trees, you see a small shrine. It is simple, both in shape and in intent. A raised platform of bricks provides a base, its edges worn but regular. At the back, a low wall rises to chest height, bearing a carved relief so eroded that the original detail has softened into suggestion. You can still see the outline of a seated figure, the curve of a head, the rough indication of arms and perhaps a scepter or rod. The god or goddess it represents may be clear to those who know the language of such images. To you, in this light, it is enough that the shape suggests presence and attention. Before the relief, a shallow bowl sits on a flat stone. Its surface is blackened, the inside layered with the ash and residue of many small offerings burned in it over time. A faint, lingering fragrance rises from it even now, though no visible incense smolders there at the moment. Something woody and sharp, like juniper or cedar or the resin of a conifer, clings to the air in front of the shrine, mixing with the scent of the surrounding leaves. A single lamp burns here with particular steadiness. Its flame is calm, almost perfectly upright, as if the air itself is very reluctant to disturb this place. The light it casts touches the carved wall more directly, filling the shallow grooves of the relief with glow and shadow, giving new depth to the worn shapes. On the stone ledge, a few small objects rest, perhaps a dried flower, perhaps a tiny clay figure, perhaps only pebbles chosen once for their pleasing shape or color. You approach the shrine not out of obligation but out of a quiet sense that it would be fitting to share a moment with whatever the builders of this place honored here. You do not have to know the exact names that accompanied their prayers. The simple act of pausing, of letting your attention rest gently on this small, dedicated space, is enough. You feel your spine straighten a little as you stand in front of it. Your shoulders, relaxed but awake, make a subtle adjustment. Somewhere inside your chest, a soft gratitude uncoils, for the existence of this garden, for the hands that moved bricks and soil and water to make it, for the night that holds it all in such gentle embrace. Whether that gratitude is directed toward a specific deity or toward the world in general hardly matters. The feeling itself is the offering. After a while, you incline your head a fraction, a gesture as natural as breathing, and then you step back, leaving the shrine as you found it, simple, quiet, ready for the next passerby who might wish to pause. Beyond the shrine, the terrace narrows as it approaches its outer edge, where a low balustrade of stone outlines the boundary between cultivated greenery and the open drop beyond. You walk toward it slowly, your sandals making soft, hollow sounds on the slightly cooling stone. The beds on either side thin out, the planting becoming lower and more sparse to avoid blocking the view. Herbs and low shrubs fill the remaining space, their silhouettes small humps of darkness, their smells gathering closer to the ground. When you reach the balustrade and rest your hands on its top, the stone meets your palms with a firmness that feels both solid and familiar. It is still faintly warm from the day's sun, though that warmth is now mostly stored in its deeper layers. The upper surface has already cooled, creating a subtle gradient, cool on the skin at first contact, warmer if you press your hands down and stay. From this vantage, the city of Babylon lies stretched out beneath you as if on a vast, dark sheet. The maze of streets and alleys that felt so enclosing when you walked among them is now flattened into flowing patterns. Roofs overlap in uneven layers. Courtyards appear as darker rectangles within lighter blocks. Here and there, tiny points of lamplight mark where someone still keeps watch, or where a late conversation continues, or where a temple maintains its perpetual flame. The river Euphrates cuts through it all as a wide band of deeper shadow. Its surface, high and broad, reflects the sky in a broken, rippling path of light, so that the moon seems to spill itself there, stretching from one bank to the other. The reflections are not steady, they tremble with the water's small movements, lengthening, shortening, shivering in response to currents and eddies. Along its banks, you can make out the darker ribbons of the quays, lined with structures and mooring posts. Boats rest there now, their hulls low and quiet in the water, their masts and poles black lines against the lighter band of the river. A few lamps burn at intervals, a glow at a ferry dock, another near a storage hall, another where night watchmen keep their station. Their light spreads only a little way onto the water, each forming its own small island of gold among the silver and black. To one side, the inner city wall rises, massive even at this distance. Its towers stand like teeth cut against the lighter sky, their tops lined with merlons. Beyond it, near one of the main thoroughfares, the Ishtar Gate can be seen. You cannot see the color of its glazed bricks in this light, but you can discern its form, the tall, arched opening and the flanking towers. When torches along its front catch the surfaces just so, they throw back a soft gleam, muted hints of the deep blue and inscribed creatures that make it famous. From up here, the city's noises are changed. What was distinct and varied at street level is now a kind of blended murmur, like the distant sound of the sea in a shell. Individual voices merge into a general hum. A shout becomes a brief, rising and falling shape in the fabric of sound and then is gone. The beating of a temple drum travels clearly, its deep notes flattening over roofs and open spaces until they reach you as a slow, steady pulse. You lean into the balustrade slightly, letting your elbows rest on the stone so that your arms can relax. The position allows your back to ease, your neck to soften. Your gaze roams over the city without any need to fix on specific landmarks or count the lights. It is enough simply to take in the vastness of living space beneath you, the knowledge that countless bodies lie sleeping or preparing to sleep, countless minds drifting toward dreams. The breeze is freer here than it was among the deeper beds, unobstructed by heavy foliage. It comes up from the river, carrying with it scents gathered along the way, the cool, damp smell of water itself, the faint fishy edge of nets and boats, the smoke from braziers still burning near the quays, the slightest trace of spices from storehouses not entirely sealed. Over all this floats a thin, resinous touch that might be cedar from some high-beamed roof or column, lending a different, higher note to the mix. You inhale slowly, filling your lungs until your chest expands against the fabric of your clothing. The air flows inside cool at first, then warms as it settles deeper. You exhale with equal deliberation, feeling your shoulders drop with the movement. With each breath taken here, at this height, the separation between you and the city's hum seems to grow in a gentle, welcome way. You are of it, but you are also apart from it, held in this elevated pocket of green and stone. When at last you turn away from the balustrade, it is not reluctance that you feel, but a quiet curiosity. The gardens above and within still call, and the night stretches ahead, wide and accommodating, with room enough for many slow wanderings. A stair near the outer edge curves upward along the inner face of the terrace wall, almost hugging it, as if it wishes to stay close to the garden's structural spine. The steps are narrow but well-proportioned, rising in short, even increments. Along the outer side, a low series of planters continues, their soil filled with plants that do not grow tall, herbs, ground covers, small shrubs bred or chosen for their modest stature. Their leaves spill slightly over the stones, softening the lines of the stair. As you begin to climb, you feel the change in smell immediately. The herbs release their volatile oils at the lightest touch or bruise, and even without direct contact, the brush of air along their surfaces coaxes some of those scents into motion. One step carries the cool, clear aroma of a mint-like plant, crisp and invigorating without being sharp. Another step brings a whiff of something more woody and grounding, perhaps thyme or a cousin. Further along, a plant with round, fuzzy leaves exhales a warm, slightly bitter perfume that lingers in your nostrils. In one spot, the path tilts slightly inward as it brings you near a spillway where water pours from a higher channel down into a stone-lined chute. The stream is narrow but continuous, a thin sheet sparkling in the combined light of moon and lamp. As it falls across the edge, it breaks into countless droplets, which rejoin below in a small, frothy patch before smoothing out again. You pass close enough that a faint mist reaches you, a fine spray that settles on your face and arms in a soft, cold veil. The sensation is momentary but vivid. For a heartbeat, your skin tightens in response, a tiny shiver of gooseflesh running across your forearms and the back of your neck. Then the droplets evaporate into the warmth of your body, leaving behind a feeling almost like having been freshly washed. Above the spillway, the stair emerges onto a new level, where a colonnade of cedar pillars runs parallel to the garden's open edge. The pillars are thick and evenly spaced, resting on square bases of stone and supporting a roof that shelters part of the terrace. The cedar wood is smooth and solid under your fingers when you touch it, its grain visible even in low light as narrow, flowing lines that wrap around each column. The scent rising from them is subtle but unmistakable, sweet and resinous, with a hint of something cool and high, like the memory of mountain air where such trees once stood. Between the pillars, light linen hangings have been strung. They are simple lengths of cloth, perhaps undyed, their edges finished just enough to prevent fraying. They move in the slightest breeze, billowing inward or outward in slow, graceful arcs. When a lamp is set close behind one, its light diffuses through the fabric, turning it into a soft, luminous plane that glows gently in the darkness. You step under the colonnade and feel a small but distinct shift. The open sky is now partially framed above you by beams and fabric, and the sense of space becomes at once narrower and more defined, like moving from a wide riverbank into a long, sheltered porch. Your footsteps take on a new quality, their echoes bouncing off the overhead wood and down the line of columns. Beyond the pillars, through the gaps between hangings, you catch glimpses of the garden on this level: wider paths, larger pools, trees whose branches have been trained into shapes that suggest gateways and arches. Lamps mark certain junctions, their light leaving bright fingerprints on nearby leaves while the spaces between remain in deeper shadow. Here and there, the pale curve of a stone bench or the upright shape of a carved object catches a stray glint. You move along the colonnade at the same unhurried pace, one hand occasionally brushing the wood of a pillar, the other perhaps grazing the edge of a cloth as it shifts. The combination of scents, cedar, linen, damp earth, faint oil, wraps around you like a layered garment, each step adding another gentle fold. Partway along, one of the clay bricks in a pillar's base catches your attention. It is set among many others, but its surface bears a line of cuneiform impressed more deeply than the rest. The wedge-shaped marks are clear and sharp, their angles catching and holding the light of a nearby lamp. The brick seems slightly larger or perhaps simply more deliberate in its placement, as if whoever laid it wanted it to be noticed. You lean in, letting your fingers hover at first above the inscription. The grooves cast tiny shadows that emphasize their pattern. Your eye traces the sequence of wedges, recognizing their rhythm without necessarily translating their exact meaning. You know enough to understand the likely content, the name of the king responsible for these works, perhaps Nebuchadnezzar himself, the mention of a god in whose honor such a project was undertaken, a formula of blessing, power, and longevity. When you finally let your fingertips rest on the brick, you feel the marks physically, the small depressions where the stylus once pressed wet clay, the raised edges where it displaced material. Time has dried and fired those impressions into permanence. The brick that bears them has been fitted here among its countless fellows, supporting weight and structure just as effectively as any uninscribed piece. There is a quiet comfort in that thought. The ambitions and anxieties that once surrounded these inscriptions, the urgency to be remembered, to please gods, to outlast rivals, have softened with the centuries. Yet the physical result of those desires holds the garden up tonight, giving your hand a solid place to rest. Human worry has turned, through craft, into something stable and supportive. You let your palm flatten fully against the brick for a moment longer, then step back, letting the inscription return to being one small part of the invisible foundation beneath all this calm. A faint movement at the edge of your vision draws your attention down the colonnade. From the shadow of an archway at the far end, a figure emerges, walking slowly toward you along the row of pillars. As he comes closer, you recognize the familiar outlines: a linen tunic tied high around the waist, bare legs and arms that show the sheen of recent work, the silhouette of a small clay lamp carried in one hand and the angled line of a short-handled hoe resting on the opposite shoulder. His steps are unhurried, his posture relaxed but steady. The lamp he holds casts a modest circle of light around his feet, illuminating the path just ahead of him and leaving much of the rest in shade. When he comes near enough to see you clearly, his gaze lifts from the ground and meets yours. There is no surprise in his expression, only a mild, focused curiosity and then a gentle recognition of another person sharing the night. He gives a small nod, the kind that carries no obligation with it, only acknowledgement: "I see you." You return the nod in the same calm spirit. For a brief moment, your two realms overlap, his, filled with the intimate knowledge of root depths, water flows, and pruning schedules, yours, centered on the slow experience of walking and noticing. No words pass between you. They are not needed. The garden itself is the shared language here, and both of you are fluent enough for this quiet exchange. After that simple greeting, you step aside slightly to let him pass if he wishes. He moves on along the colonnade, his lamp swinging gently with the rhythm of his strides. Soon his figure dissolves back into a blend of shadow and occasional glints of light on wood and cloth, returning to the background hum of the garden's caretaking. Your own path continues in the opposite direction, deeper into the terraces, the impression of that human presence lingering pleasantly, like another small, warm lamp in the back of your mind. The murmur of the water screw returns, now more insistent, as you leave the colonnade and follow a path that bends inward. The sound draws you toward a small courtyard where the machinery is partially exposed to view. Here, the terraces open a space so that the work of raising water can be tended and observed. The ground underfoot is slightly damp, the stones darkened in irregular patches where splashes have reached them. The screw rises from a square stone basin, its spiral blades fitted around a central axle that disappears below the waterline. The wood is thick, dark, and swollen with long use, smoothed in places where contact is repeated and rougher in others where it has only known water and air. Even now, in the quiet of the night, it turns with a steady, slow motion, driven by some hidden power, perhaps a team of workers at a lower level, walking a circular path in patient steps, perhaps some other mechanism set in motion earlier and left to run. As the spiral climbs, each section lifts a small pocket of water and carries it upward. At the top, the water spills from the screw into a trough with a soft, continuous gushing sound, then divides into channels that run off in separate directions, one toward terraces you have already seen, another toward levels you only sense. Droplets fling themselves from the edges of the blades as they emerge, scattering like brief, cold stars around the base. They strike the surrounding stone with tiny, almost musical taps, leaving the surfaces speckled with moisture. Some cling to rough patches in the masonry, swelling into small beads that hang for a while before gravity convinces them to fall. You step closer, feeling the air cool and thicken with the mist. Each breath you take here has a sharper, wetter texture, the inside of your nose registering the difference. If any part of your skin had heated while you walked, that warmth is now soothed. A faint spray settles on your face and forearms, leaving behind a barely perceptible film that makes your skin feel alive, awake to touch, even as the rest of you sinks deeper into calm. You watch the screw's rotation for a while, letting your eyes trace the path of a single visible mark on the wood as it rises, curves, disappears, then reappears lower down. The rhythm is hypnotic in its steadiness. There is no rush in its movement, no strain visible, only the repeated fulfillment of its simple purpose, lifting water from a lower place to a higher one, again and again. The sounds of creaking wood, slipping water, and gentle splashes combine into a kind of low, wordless chant. Without quite intending to, you find your own breathing aligning with it. Inhale as the mark you follow rises, exhale as it descends. Inhale as water fills the pockets, exhale as it spills out above. The alignment is not precise and does not need to be. The feeling of moving in time with something so constant is what matters. You stay until the pattern feels fully absorbed, stored somewhere inside you like a slow, reassuring pulse. Only then do you step back, letting the machinery continue its patient task without your gaze upon it. When you climb again, it is by a narrower stair that veers away from the central structures, threading upward between thicker plantings. The steps here are slightly uneven. Not through neglect but because roots and soil have asked for a little more space and the builders have granted it. In some spots, a stone has tilted a fraction, creating an extra angle underfoot that your body instinctively adjusts for. On one side, a tree trunk rises so close to the stair that its bark almost grazes your shoulder as you pass. Your hand rests on that trunk for balance and curiosity both. The bark is deeply ridged, the grooves wide enough that your fingers can sink into them slightly, finding natural paths. It is cool to the touch, with small rough knots and smooth patches where branches once were. In one spot, dried sap has emerged and hardened into a glossy, amber-like bead. When you pass your finger over it, it feels different from everything else, smooth, glassy, holding the faintest scent of sweetness when warmed by your skin. Above, branches interlace, forming what feels like a series of green tunnels. The sky becomes visible only in fragments, a glimpse of a bright star here, a slice of moon there, then only darkness as leaves close over again. The sense of being within something living grows stronger, as if you are moving through the arteries of a great sleeping creature rather than an arrangement of bark and blade. The smells are more concentrated here. Moist soil under the beds releases its earthy, slightly metallic aroma, strengthened where water has recently passed. Crushed leaves on the path exhale their individual perfumes, the peppery sharpness of one plant, the faint bitterness of another, a sweet, hay-like note from fallen petals drying underfoot. Eventually, the stair levels out into a narrow walkway edged on both sides by low, densely planted beds. The plants here do not reach above your knees, but they cover the ground completely, knitting it into a soft, continuous carpet of green. Tiny flowers dot some of the herbs, pale against the dark leaves. Others carry their subtle beauty in the shape of their foliage alone. The walkway itself is just wide enough for two people to pass if they come close, but tonight you have it to yourself. Your footsteps sound smaller on this level, quieter, perhaps because the mass of plants on either side absorbs some of their energy. The world feels intimate, as if this level has been made for those who seek a more private, gently enclosed space. At the end of the path, the garden opens suddenly into a small balcony-like platform jutting out over the lower terraces. Its floor is paved, but a thick woven mat covers part of it, fibers bundled and bound into a resilient surface that softens the contact of feet and cushions the fall of any object dropped here. Against the inner wall stands a low couch or divan. Its frame is made of wood, smoothed and polished, the legs sturdy and slightly curved. The surface is layered with cushions and folded textiles, woven covers of linen and wool, perhaps, some patterned, some plain, all softened by use. Their edges overlap in relaxed, irregular lines, inviting adjustment. No one lies here now. The couch waits in the quiet, like a boat at a dock awaiting its next voyage. You approach the couch and reach out to press your hand lightly on its upper cushion. Beneath your palm, the fabric yields, then pushes back gently, showing that the filling inside, wool, reeds, or some combination, is resilient but not stiff. The textile itself is smooth where it has been worn by many bodies, slightly textured where the weave remains more evident. A faint smell of clean fabric rises from it, perhaps refreshed earlier with herbs or smoke, a whisper of lavender, or of some local plant used for the same purpose, mixes with the surrounding garden scents. You take a moment simply to stand at the side of the couch, letting your body gauge how ready it is to rest more fully. Your legs feel pleasantly used, the muscles in your calves and thighs warm and loose rather than tight. Your back has worked gently with each stair and path, supporting you without strain. There is a sense, not of urgency, but of a quiet readiness, like a door that has swung open and waits for you to step through. You turn and lower yourself onto the couch, first sitting, then shifting your weight carefully as you recline. The cushions settle under you, adjusting to your shape. The woven fabric beneath your fingertips feels reassuringly firm where it covers the wooden frame and more yielding where it spans between supports. You rearrange a cushion under your head, testing its height, then slide another beneath your knees so that your lower back can relax fully. As you find your position, you move slowly, so as not to jostle your body into wakefulness. Each adjustment is deliberate, a slight tilt of the pelvis to release tension in the spine, a gentle roll of the shoulders to find where the blades are best supported, a tiny rotation of the head to ease the neck. When at last you settle, there is a sense of alignment, as if your bones have found their natural stack and your muscles no longer need to brace. You let your heels rest on the mat, feeling its fibrous texture against the leather soles of your sandals or against your feet if you have slipped them off earlier in the quiet. The mat's surface is firm yet forgiving, grounding you further into the space. The sky fills your view now in a way it has not yet done tonight. From this position, the frame of the terrace recedes, and what remains is a wide field of darkness punctured by innumerable points of light. The branches of nearby trees reach into this field, their edges softened by the low glow of lamps and the silvery wash of the moon. Where leaves overlap, they form clusters of deeper shadow; where branches separate, stars shine through. The moon has climbed higher since you first saw it above the streets. Its light now spreads more evenly across the garden, softening shadows and lending a subtle sheen to leaves and stone alike. When it falls on your face, it brings a gentle coolness, not enough to chill, only enough to remind you that the world is vast and the night is still growing. You feel the contact between your body and the couch in multiple points: under your calves, under your thighs, along the length of your back, beneath your shoulders, under the back of your head. Each of these points carries a small portion of your weight. Over time, they begin to share it more evenly, as if the cushions are teaching your body how to rest on something that is fully capable of holding it. Your hands find comfortable resting places of their own. One might lie on your chest, palm down, fingers relaxed, rising and falling with each breath. The other might rest beside you, palm open against the fabric, or lightly hold the edge of a folded cloth, its hem a simple, reassuring line between your fingers. If you wish, you draw a light cover over yourself, something woven but loosely so, enough to trap a layer of your own warmth without becoming heavy. The cloth settles over your body like another layer of night, following the contours of you, marking your shape but not binding it. Around you, the garden continues its quiet, tireless work. Water moves through channels and over stones. Leaves shift their positions one fraction of an angle at a time. Invisible creatures go about their minute lives in the soil and air. The world does not pause because you have decided to lie down; instead, it continues in the same, slow rhythm, and you are folded gently into it. You, for the moment, do not. In this stillness, your breath becomes the main event. At first, you simply notice that it is happening. Air enters through your nose, cool against the inner surfaces, tracing a path along the back of your throat and down into the expanding space of your chest. For a brief moment, at the top of each inhale, there is a delicate pause, a suspended instant in which everything feels gently full and complete. Then, just as naturally, the air leaves again, warmed by your body, flowing up and out in a soft stream that you can feel brush your upper lip. You do not rush to change this pattern. You let it show itself to you as it already is, without criticism or adjustment. The breath has been with you all day, unnoticed much of the time, working without praise. Now, in the quiet of the garden, it steps into the pool of your awareness and stands there, simple and unadorned. If you choose, you allow a subtle intention to enter. You invite the inhale to lengthen by a small degree, enough that your ribs expand a bit more, your belly rises a little higher. You might count silently, not with sharp numbers but with a slow inner rhythm: 1, 2, 3, perhaps 4, each beat a soft marker rather than a rigid measure. At the top, you rest for a heartbeat, not holding the breath in with effort, just dwelling briefly in the sense of fullness. Then you let the exhale extend a little beyond the length of the inhale. The air leaves on a count that feels 1 or 2 steps longer: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sensation of emptiness that follows is not alarming; it is spacious, like a room cleared of clutter. Your chest settles, your belly falls, your shoulders drop another fraction as if someone has gently loosened the strings holding them up. You repeat this pattern a few times, slow, steady in-breaths followed by slightly longer, slower out-breaths. You do not force it. If the breath wishes to shorten or lengthen of its own accord, you let it. The aim is not to control but to cooperate, to move just close enough to the edge of attention that the breath feels seen and appreciated without being pinned. As your breath deepens, your awareness of other sensations shifts. The distant hum of the city, the garden's chorus of water and leaves, the sometimes noticeable, sometimes almost absent rustle of fabric in the colonnade, all of these remain, but they drift a little further toward the edges of your consciousness. What stands nearer now is the inner movement, the rise and fall inside your chest, the stretch and release of muscles around your ribs, the gentle expansion of your back against the cushions beneath you. The small, sharp concerns that might have tugged at you earlier in the day now feel far away, as if they belonged to someone else's story. Tasks that waited for completion, words you might have wished to say differently, decisions you have yet to make, all of these seem to hover outside the boundaries of this terrace, unable to climb the stairs tonight. They do not vanish, exactly, but they lose their urgency, their edges dulled by the enveloping calm of stone and foliage and night air. What fills their place are impressions and states rather than thoughts. The coolness of the air as it passes through your nostrils. The slight warmth of your hands resting on fabric and skin. The awareness of your heartbeat, not as a loud drum but as a quiet, steady presence somewhere in your chest and in the vessels of your wrists and neck. Each of these sensations arrives, lingers briefly, and then recedes, like waves lapping gently against a shore. As your attention turns more fully inward, your body continues its subtle dialogue with the couch and the air and the garden. Muscles that had remained slightly engaged out of habit now receive permission to let go. A band at the back of your neck softens, allowing your head to sink a little more firmly into the cushion beneath it. The small muscles around your eyes release, easing the delicate skin at the corners. Your jaw relaxes, your teeth parting slightly, your tongue resting comfortably on the floor of your mouth. Your breath, responding to this softening, becomes quieter and more even still, like a tide settling into a gentle, predictable rhythm. Time begins to change shape. If you were to ask yourself how many minutes have passed since you lay down, the answer would not come easily. The mind that tracks such things has given up its vigilance, lulled by the repetitive, soothing patterns of sound and breath and subtle sensation. The night no longer feels like a sequence of discrete moments lined up in a row, but more like a broad, dark river through which you drift at an unhurried, unmeasured pace. At some point, a slight breeze strengthens into something more continuous, flowing across the terrace with a firmer hand. You feel it move over your face, a cool brush that lifts small strands of hair and slides along the curve of your jaw. It slips under the edges of your coverlet, exploring the hollow between cloth and skin, then moves on. In response, you might draw the fabric a little closer around your shoulders or tuck it more snugly beneath your feet, not out of discomfort but as a simple, sleepy adjustment. The leaves of the nearby trees respond to the wind with a soft rustling that shifts in texture depending on which branches it meets. Olive leaves, narrow and smooth, whisper in a high, dry way, like distant paper being turned. Fig leaves, larger and softer, create a deeper sound, more like the quiet brushing of hands against cloth. Palm fronds graze each other with a low, continuous murmur, reminiscent of a slow brush against a drumhead. Fabric in the colonnade moves too. You can't see it clearly from your current angle, but you can imagine the linen hangings billowing inward and outward, their edges lifting and falling in time with the wind's breaths. The occasional faint flap reaches your ears, softened by distance and the insulating effect of foliage. The water's song shifts almost imperceptibly. The increased breeze nudges small ripples across surfaces that were previously smooth, introducing a new layer of tiny, overlapping sounds, more delicate splashes where drops meet disturbed water, altered echoes in pools that now wear slightly more textured faces. The changes are subtle but constant, offering your drifting attention an ever-changing, ever so slightly varied soundscape in which to rest. Far below, in the city, the night has deepened into that particular quiet that comes in the hours far from both sunset and dawn. Most rooftop conversations have ended. Fires that burned brightly at dusk have burned low or been carefully extinguished, leaving rooftops in full darkness or with only the faintest ember glow. Even the occasional shout is rare now. The temple drums still mark the passing of the watches, but their beats feel more widely spaced, as if time itself is stretching between them. Each low, resonant note arrives as a distant reminder that the outer world is still turning, that somewhere priests maintain their rituals, that the river continues its long journey. Yet those notes also seem to confirm that nothing is required of you in this moment beyond rest. Your body continues to settle, to grow heavier in the best possible way. The weight is not oppressive, it is reassuring. Each point where you meet the couch, heels, calves, thighs, hips, spine, shoulders, head, feels anchored. Held. It is as though the boundaries between your flesh and the cushions have blurred slightly, their materials blending at the edges. If you were to move, even a little, there is no doubt that the couch would support you. That knowledge allows the muscles responsible for constant, small adjustments in posture to relax more completely. Tiny tremors of readiness, usually invisible, fade away. Your breathing, in response, becomes so quiet that if someone stood a few paces away, they might not see your chest move at all. Yet it continues, faithful and unbroken, like a tide that doesn't need to announce itself to be real. In this softened state, stray images begin to drift through the space behind your closed or half-closed eyes. They are not yet dreams in the full sense, but they carry some of dream's looseness. They arrive without your calling and leave without your dismissal, appearing and dissolving with all the effortlessness of clouds forming and unforming in a high sky. You might, in one such flicker, see yourself walking once more along the first terrace, your hand grazing the tops of shrubs, the jasmine by the rectangular pool releasing its waves of scent. The memory is not a precise playback of earlier moments but rather a distilled version, the essence of cool water, pale blossoms, reflected moonlight. In your mind's eye, the pool's surface may look smoother than it did in reality, the stars in it more numerous, the jasmine's petals slightly more luminous. Another image may present you with the under-terrace vault again, the arches and columns and hanging droplets, but now you move through them without feeling the stone under your feet, as if you are a weightless observer. The water screw turns in a slower, more exaggerated way, each drop of water rising and falling as if in a slightly thickened time. The sound it makes is both the same and not the same, enriched by a faint, imagined echo. A third image may bring you back to the balustrade overlooking the city. But this time, when you look down, the lamps and stars below blur into a single, shimmering field of light, with no sharp distinction between river and roof, street and sky. The world glows like a slow exhale of fireflies. This view does not trouble you. It feels right, in the way that dream logic often feels right, because it expresses a feeling rather than a literal arrangement, the awareness of many lives, many lights, all resting and moving below and around you. These half-formed visions do not claim you completely. You can, if you wish, open your eyes and return your gaze to the actual stars above you, the actual leaves at the edges of your vision, the actual pattern of shadows on the terrace. The boundary between inner and outer remains permeable at this stage, like a thin, soft curtain that can be parted with ease. Yet each time you slip back into the inner space, the images come more easily, and the outer world requires a little more deliberate effort to fully register. The weight of your eyelids increases, or perhaps you simply grow less interested in lifting them. The sense of yourself as a body lying on a couch in a particular garden in a particular city gradually begins to blur into something broader, less sharply defined. Sometimes, the mind in this state offers up thought fragments that are not images but small strings of words, phrases, impressions, pieces of internal commentary. You might hear, somewhere inside, a simple, soft acknowledgement. Here, you might think, without using the word so much as feeling its weight. then now, then rest. These are not instructions from a stern inner voice, but more like gentle labels floating on the surface of a deep pool. They appear and disappear without demanding action. If concerns from earlier in the day try to reassert themselves, if a memory of an unfinished task or an unresolved conversation briefly surfaces, they do so with less color and less force. It is as if they are distant figures calling from far away across a wide plain. You can see them, but their voices do not quite reach you. The garden, with its sounds and scents and steady presence, stands between you and them, a benevolent buffer. When such a thought arises, you may feel, for a moment, the familiar tug of attention toward it. But before the pull can gain strength, the simple reality of your breath gently intervenes. Another inhale comes, another exhale, and the thought, deprived of your focus, fades, receding into the general darkness of the night like a small bird folding its wings and settling on a branch. The surfaces of your body continue to report their impressions, too. The skin of your face registers the subtle temperature differences between the air passing over your cheeks and the air trapped under the coverlet near your chin. The backs of your hands feel the texture of linen or wool beneath them. The fine hairs on your forearms sense the faint movements of air currents that swirl and settle as the night's breeze shifts. Within, deeper sensations make themselves gently known. The slow contraction and relaxation of your diaphragm, the almost imperceptible expansion of your ribs, the thrum of blood moving through vessels whose paths you cannot see but can somehow feel. I am moving, they say, in a language older than words. I am carrying, I am cleaning, I am maintaining. You do not need to respond. It is enough to notice, briefly, then drift again. High above the terrace, a moth finds one of the hanging lamps and begins its own slow dance. From your position, you might not see the moth itself, but you can see the evidence of its movement, the irregular shadow that flits across a nearby column, the way the lamp's glow occasionally dims and brightens as a small body passes in front of the flame. The pattern of light on the ground shifts in response, edges blurring and sharpening in a quiet, repetitive choreography. The moth is driven by whatever impulse draws such creatures to light. It flutters in close, its wings beating faster than your eye can easily track, then veers away, only to circle back again. There is an urgency in its movements, but that urgency does not break the charmed stillness of the garden. Instead, its hurried loops feel like a delicate embroidery added to a much larger, slower fabric. Eventually, the moth tires or is satisfied or simply grows less interested in this particular flame. It drifts away into the darkness, settling on some cool surface where it becomes only another tiny, resting shape among many. The lamp continues its work, its wick steadily consuming oil, its flame dancing just enough to stay alive. The lamp's light is not strong enough to wash out the stars, not from this vantage. It creates a local pool of warmth and gold, a small sun suspended within the greater night. Its glow touches the surfaces closest to it, stone, wood, leaf, cloth, and leaves everything beyond to the broader, softer silver of the moon. Another lamp further along the terrace has already burned low. Its wick, once bright, is now a curved line of charcoal lying in a shallow bowl where oil has thickened and cooled. No one rushes to relight it. The garden does not need all lamps burning at once to remain what it is. Some illuminate, some rest, the balance is enough. That is true of you as well. There will be other nights when you move through the terraces more alert, taking in details consciously, collecting impressions. Tonight, this garden is generous in a different way. It offers itself as a cradle, a place where your awareness can dim without disappearing, where you can sink toward sleep held on all sides by stone and air and living things. Your awareness now floats in a kind of twilight, neither fully awake nor completely surrendered to dreams. In this twilight, time becomes even softer. The intervals between breaths feel both brief and endless. The sound of water in the channel seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, no longer tied to the specific features you observed earlier. The rustle of leaves above you might be happening in the trees directly overhead or in some other part of the garden entirely, it doesn't matter. Occasionally, your body expresses its own small needs. A muscle in your leg twitches, then settles. One of your shoulders grows slightly too cool, and you shift the coverlet an inch higher. Your head tilts a fraction to one side, seeking a slightly different angle on the pillow. Each of these movements is small and automatic, appearing and disappearing like ripples on the surface of a deeper stillness. If you were to observe yourself from a distance, you would see someone lying very quietly, the rise and fall of their chest subtle, their limbs arranged loosely and naturally. There would be no signs of tension, no clenched fists, no furrowed brow, no tightness at the corners of the mouth. The whole posture would speak of surrender, but not the surrender of defeat, rather, the surrender of trust, of knowing that one is safe enough to let go. Within, the boundary between waking thoughts and dream images blurs further. A new scene might begin to play in your mind, perhaps a continuation of the garden, perhaps a transformation of it, without your fully realizing the transition. You might find yourself walking along a path that never quite existed physically but feels entirely consistent with what you have already experienced, a corridor of leaves that glows faintly from within, a stair made of nothing but overlapping shadows, a pool whose surface reflects not the sky but some other, inward landscape. You do not question these appearances. The part of you that would analyze or categorize them has grown drowsy, its tool set down for the night. Instead, you drift with whatever arises, like a leaf carried by a current that is too gentle to notice except when you look for it. Somewhere, perhaps, a distant rooster misjudges the hour and gives a short, confused crow. The sound reaches you in a weakened form, flattened by distance and obscured by the layers of other noise between here and there. It arrives not as a sharp cry but as a vague, upward sweep of sound, almost immediately absorbed by the surrounding darkness. Closer, a night insect adjusts its rhythm, its chirp pausing for several seconds before beginning again with a slightly different cadence. Another insect joins in, then another, until the garden's invisible orchestra has shifted into a new arrangement. The differences are small, but they give your half-dreaming mind something quiet to float upon, like variations in the pattern of waves on a calm sea. The drums in the temples of the city mark another watch. The note that reaches you now is so faint that you feel it as much as hear it, a low vibration that seems to spread gently through the stone under you more than through the air. It is a reminder that the night is moving, that the earth under the city rotates beneath the stars, that time exists even when you are not measuring it. But this reminder is not a summons. It does not call you to rise or act. It is more like a lullaby sung at a distance, its chorus composed of reassurance. Things continue, it says, even when you are at rest. The world does not depend upon your constant vigilance. You may sleep. Your breath, taking that permission, settles even further into its relaxed pattern. The pauses between exhale and inhale widen almost imperceptibly, small secret spaces where, for a heartbeat or two, nothing seems to move inside you at all. These moments, though brief, feel expansive, like doorways into something vast and quiet. Then, as if on its own initiative, the inhale begins again, filling you gently from the inside out. The weight of your limbs now feels different, as if they are not only heavy but also slightly distant. They belong to you, but they also belong to the couch, to the mat, to the terrace floor. The lines between these things blur, edges softening until it becomes difficult to say exactly where your body ends and the garden begins. The night above the hanging gardens continues, indifferent to the state of any individual sleeper. Stars will slowly across the sky, tracing arcs that generations of watchers have learned to read. The moon, having passed its highest point, begins to slope down toward the western horizon, its light thinning slightly, growing more angled. The air cools a little more, a change your skin registers but your deeper self does not feel compelled to react to. The garden adjusts accordingly, leaves contract ever so slightly, water temperatures drop by a degree or two, insects shift positions. Water continues to be drawn from the river below. The mechanisms turn, whether attended directly by human hands in this moment or set in motion earlier and left to their own established patterns. The screws lift, the channels accept, the basins receive. Gravity pulls down, engineering pushes up, and between them the garden's thirst is perpetually sated. Plants continue their quiet labor. Roots reach into the wet soil, drawing up moisture and nutrients. Sap flows in unseen circuits through trunks and stems. Leaves exchange invisible gases with the air, taking in what they need, releasing what they do not. Flowers close or open according to their own rhythms, some more responsive to darkness, some waiting for the hint of approaching dawn. Below, in the city, people sleep on rooftops and in courtyards and in small rooms whose walls still hold some of the day's warmth. Bodies curl and stretch, turn and then become still again. Dreams rise and fall in their minds, some vivid, some faint, some forgotten before the first light of morning. A few wake for short tasks, checking a fire, tending an infant, responding to a restless animal, and then slip back into slumber. In one temple, a priest pours a measured libation before a statue, oil or wine glistening briefly in lamplight before soaking into an altar stone. In another, a solitary watcher rearranges offerings on a table, straightening a bowl here, a loaf there. Their movements are part of a long, continuous pattern of attention that outlasts any individual life. They, too, will sleep later, but their wakefulness now is gentle, almost as hushed as your own near sleep. The hanging gardens, perched above, observe none of this with eyes, but they participate in it all. They are part of the city's body, an elevated organ dedicated to coolness and shade and beauty. Tonight, that organ offers itself as a sanctuary not only for the royal household or favored visitors but also, very simply, for you. By now, the part of you that watches your own state, the inner observer that says I am lying here, I am breathing, I am almost asleep, has grown faint. It is not gone, but its voice has become a whisper. Easily drowned out by the softer, deeper sounds of your nervous system winding down. Your thoughts, when they appear, are slow and thick, like ink dropped into water that takes a long time to disperse. Some never quite form into recognizable shapes before dissolving again. A dream may begin fully now, its narrative pulling you gently away from the terrace even as your body remains on the couch. In it, perhaps you walk again through the gardens, but the paths loop in ways they never did physically, each terrace leading to another that is and is not the same. Perhaps you step through an archway and find yourself again at the river, or in a courtyard you have never seen, or looking at the stars from a place above even this. Whatever the dream's content, its feeling will likely echo the mood of the night, calm, slow, suffused with the sense of being carried rather than pushed. No urgent chase, no looming danger, no sudden shocks. The garden has lent its character to your inner landscapes, its water, its stone, its leaves, its stillness. If, for a moment, a sharper sound intrudes, a branch cracking as it settles, a distant shout, the clatter of something dropped on stone, it may tug at you just enough to lighten your sleep. You might float briefly closer to waking, your awareness dipping toward the surface. But the larger environment is so consistently gentle, so free of threat, that these small disturbances quickly fold back into the background, their edges smoothed by the ongoing chorus of softer noises. Your body remains where it was, small adjustments happening without waking you fully. A leg shifts, turning the angle of a knee by a few degrees. An arm slips from one position to another, the hand coming to rest in a new, equally relaxed place. Your head rolls slightly on the cushion, finding a spot where the pressure feels just right. The couch holds all these changes without complaint. The mat cushions any small sounds they make. The terrace floor rests beneath, unmoving, utterly reliable. Gradually, even the awareness that you are dreaming may fade. There comes a phase of sleep in which you are neither the observer nor the participant, at least not in any way you will remember clearly. Your brain tends to its own unseen tasks, sorting impressions, consolidating memory, washing away the residue of the day's stimuli. During this time, you are more deeply absent from the conscious world than at any other point. Yet the garden remains. It continues to exist around you, a kind of slow, breathing architecture that needs no witness to be itself. The channels still sing their watery songs. The leaves still move with every subtle shift in air. The lamps burn down, one after another, their flames shrinking, gutters forming, wicks eventually curling into faint, glowing threads before going dark. Somewhere, a gardener on a lower level might glance up and see the silhouette of the upper terraces against the stars, perhaps wondering briefly who lies on that particular couch tonight. Or perhaps no one looks up at all. It doesn't matter. The garden's kindness does not depend on being noticed. At some indeterminate point, a cooler current of air moves through the terrace. It might be the first hint of the slow, nightly exchange between land and sky, or simply a wandering ribbon of temperature difference. It touches the exposed skin of your face and hands, and your sleeping body responds instinctively, drawing the coverlet a little higher, curling slightly more inward. If this movement of fabric makes the tiniest rustling sound, it is quickly swallowed by the greater quiet. No one remarks on it. No movement of quartz or clay or chlorophyll depends upon it. It is simply another small event folded into the vast, slow continuity of the night. Eventually, though you will not know the exact moment, the deepest part of the night begins to tilt toward its end. Some imperceptible shift in the quality of darkness occurs. The stars near the eastern horizon grow slightly less sharp. The air changes its taste, gaining a hint of cool dryness that it did not possess before. Somewhere in the distance, a bird whose inner clock is finely tuned to these transitions stirs on its branch. Its body sensing light before any eye can see it. Your sleep, by then, has likely cycled through various depths, dreams rising and falling like waves. The content of those dreams may be simple or elaborate, quiet or gently vivid, but their general tone has been set by the place in which your body rests, protected, elevated, steeped in the sounds of water and leaves. For now, though, in the long stretch before any actual light appears, you remain in that enveloping darkness, embraced by stone and cloth and air. High above the city, high above the river, the hanging gardens keep their vigil. Water continues to climb from below, to travel its patient routes, to spill and sink and rise and spill again. Roots continue to anchor soil, to drink, to hold. Leaves continue to breathe and shield, their surfaces catching the slightest glints of fading starlight. The terraces hold all this motion, their stones stacked and mortared in patterns that have proven themselves over and over again. Below, Babylon sleeps. Lamps have gone out in most doorways and courtyards. The few that remain burn low. Dogs lie curled in doorways, their ears twitching in their sleep, their breathing slow. Ferries rock gently at their moorings on the river, the ropes that hold them creaking softly when currents shift. The wide streets are empty except for occasional temple attendants or watchmen, their sandals scraping lightly on the paving as they pass. Only the temples keep their small lights burning with any regularity, their inner chambers aglow with steady flames. The gods they house, whether wakeful or not, receive the muted devotion of those who pass through the night in service. Offerings stand ready on altars, their scents long since released into the air. The moon has traveled significantly now, nearing the horizon. Its light, thinner and more slanted, still touches the upper edges of the walls and the highest points of the terraces. Soon it will slip below the line of the earth, leaving the stars alone for a brief interval before dawn begins to wash them away. None of this demands anything of you. Your work, as the quiet voice inside you said earlier, is to sleep. And so you do. You sleep in the heart of the garden, on a simple couch beneath a slow sky, surrounded on all sides by stone and water and leaves. The sounds of the terraces, dripping, flowing, rustling, breathing, wrap around you like a vast, soft body, warm where it should be, cool where it is needed. They become the blanket over the blanket, the roof over the roof, the cradle under the couch. Nothing tugs at you to rise. Nothing stands over you insisting that you remember each detail of this night. The garden is willing to let your recollection blur, to allow most of these impressions to sink into the deep well of your subconscious, where they may return only in fragments or not at all. The night is content to receive you exactly as you are, slowly sinking, softly drifting, your edges dissolving into stillness. Gently, deeply, completely at rest.